Hey guys, welcome to Thrive Bites, the official podcast of Dr. Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc. On every episode, I talk with health and wellness experts from all over the world, such as doctors, chefs, dietitians, coaches, and many more. And I sit down with them and have casual conversations about plant-based lifestyle, how to elevate our emotional resilience, and what it really means to thrive. And I bring all of this to you. So let's get to this week's episode. Okay, guys. Well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites. This is your host, Colin Zhu, and we're on air, the new live series with COVID-19, Staying Well Amongst COVID series. I have today a wonderful, wonderful guest. Her name is Dr. Vanessa Calderon. Say hi to everyone, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with you, Colin.
I'm super excited for you to be here as well. Just a little bit about the series. So like I said, I'm the regular host of Thrive Bites, and it is a wellness series. It's an interview show, and we focus on plant-based living, enhancing emotional wellness, and creating a thriving mindset. And we are in a very interesting time in our lives right now for this pandemic. And so I decided to create this wellness series and pretty much ask wellness experts to come on and be able to share their perspectives and be able to help out the general public and also healthcare providers and workers as well. So with that in mind, thank you again. I'm going to welcome you. And tell everyone where you're calling from and a little bit about what you do.
Sure, absolutely. So again, I'm Vanessa Calderon. I'm calling from the California Bay Area in Northern California, specifically right outside of San Francisco. So I am a mother of two beautiful little kiddos. My daughter's 5 and my son just turned 3. We got to have a little COVID party for him. I'm also an emergency medicine physician in San Francisco, where I also serve as a department chair and medical director. And you and I got connected because of my resiliency work. So I'm the resiliency director for Vituity, which is a large staffing multidisciplinary organization across the country. And I'm also a certified compassion fatigue educator and therapist. So I've been doing resiliency work now for a few years. And sort of my story that brought me to resiliency had to do with a lot of sort of personal pain and trauma in my own life. About 4 years ago or so now, my husband and I were trying to get pregnant with our second kid. And at that time, I can now just fully admit that I was a total type A control freak. And I was trying to align the pregnancy and the birth of my kid with my work schedule and deadlines, which it sounds so crazy now saying out loud. Because as you know, all you parents out there listening, you know that there's very few things you can control when it comes to pregnancy and the birth of your child. But alas, I had to learn that the hard way, and so it goes. And, we'd gotten pregnant pretty quickly with our first kid, so I figured we weren't going to struggle at all with the second, but that wasn't the case. In fact, we had 3 miscarriages as we were trying to get pregnant. And the last one was probably the absolute worst because we were pretty far along in that pregnancy, and I actually thought it was going to stick. So it was both just emotionally and physically painful because, when you're that far along in a pregnancy, the miscarriage and the stomach cramping is just really miserable. And I remember when I started miscarrying, I actually had a scheduled ER shift that day. And, I took some ibuprofen and I'm like, I'm going to go to work. And so I go to work, and one of the nurses, who's also a very, very dear friend of mine, noticed that I wasn't sort of my normal upbeat self. And she jokingly said to me, "What's up with you? You're so grumpy today." And let me tell you, Colin, it took everything in me that day to just not break down and start crying in front of everybody. So anyway, fast forward a few months, and we were super fortunate. Eventually ended up getting pregnant on our own. And again, not on my timeline at all, but that's how it goes. And, a few weeks after that, our son was born. And soon after my son was born, I find out that my mom, who had been in remission from breast cancer for about 10 years, her cancer was back and it was now in stage 4 with metastases to her bones. So around that time, as I'm on maternity leave, I also get a frantic call from the wife of one of the physicians at my site. She let me know that he's critically ill, he's in the ICU, and that I had to take him off the schedule. So he was our full-time night doc and was working anywhere from like 17 to 18 shifts a month. So it was a huge staffing crunch.
A lot of shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so I cut my maternity leave short and I went back to work so I could help with staffing. And, you know, of course, when it rains, it pours. So I was back to work for like less than a month. And I learned that our hospital was not planning to automatically renew our contract for the emergency department. So now, you know, I'm learning how to be a mom of 2 young kids, a newborn and a 3-year-old. I'm trying to breastfeed and pump while working a heavy load of clinical shifts. I'm supporting my mom with all her cancer treatment. And now I also get to manage my department's contract instability. Oh, Colin, suffice it to say, things were stressful.
Yeah.
And it didn't take me very long to start actually manifesting physical symptoms of severe stress. I had a terrible, terrible time sleeping. I developed horrible neck pain, shoulder pain, and jaw pain. And I initially approached this by just sort of telling myself that everything would be fine, and I ignored all the symptoms. I just totally wasn't connected. And I ignored it until my jaw pain got so bad, I started having really bad trouble chewing. And so I assumed that I must have had a cavity. There must be something physically there causing me to have such severe pain. So I went to a dentist who did x-rays and told me everything was fine. I was like, there is no way everything is fine. Something is definitely wrong. And he asked me if I grinded my teeth. And, you know, up until that point, I've never had that problem. So then he says, you know, when people are stressed, they tend to grind their teeth at night. Is there any chance you could be experiencing stress? I was shocked. I couldn't believe that, I just couldn't believe that my mind and body were so disconnected from what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And that crisis was my turning point. You know, that was my aha moment. It created an incredible opportunity for me to just reevaluate all my priorities and my choices in life. At that time, I started to invest in personal resiliency courses for myself, some personal development workshops. I read a ton of books and articles on these topics. And through all of this work, I realized that all the choices I had been making didn't truly reflect my values. You know, I'd always said my family came first, and that's not the way I was making my choices. So I just chose at that moment to stop being a victim of my circumstances, and I shifted. You know, I began to set really healthy work boundaries that allowed me to remain an effective leader without burning out. I was super intentional about setting aside time for my mental, physical, and spiritual health. And I was really disciplined about leaving work at work so that when I was home with my husband and my kids, I was just fully present with them. You know, now I can tell you that after practicing all these things and making all these choices, and I'm now living a really wholehearted and happy life. I have a career I love, a strong marriage, I'm connected with my kids, and I'm still able to be present and supportive for my mom. So, you know, this personal resiliency work transformed my life, and I'm just on a mission now. I'm on a mission to pass these tools on to everyone because, as you probably have experienced, you know, resiliency and happiness has this incredible ripple effect. And when you're happier, your patients are happier, your spouse and children are happier, your friends are happier, and ultimately, you're just a source for improvement and happiness, and you make the world a better place. And that's sort of what brought me here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, number one, thank you for sharing that. I think it's a incredible story from, you know, your own personal journey, your family's journey. And, you know, I think it's important to highlight how, especially during these times where the healthcare system is being taking the limelight of everything, you know, whether it's, you know, for better or worse. I think in these times for the pandemic, it's both, you know, it shows and reflects how tireless, selfless, and hardworking and dedicated our healthcare providers and workers are. And it also shows the worst in terms of how broken our system can be, right? Obviously, the system is made up of many, many different gears and components. But nonetheless, we still have a lot of people that are, you know, fighting the good fight, you know, so to speak. So, you know, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, I definitely want to address that. It is very important to talk about resiliency, and you made a really good point in terms of taking care of yourself. And throughout this entire series, we've talked about self-care. We've talked about, how to take care of our families. How do we take care of, each other? How do we enhance our connections? And so resiliency to me is kind of like a practice. You read about it, and it's not just about reading about it. It's about putting that into practice. So I would like for you to kind of go into a little bit about, what does it mean to be resilient, and how do we use the tools that come out of that to be able to take care of ourselves, whether, we are, family members, or if we are, in this current timeline of the pandemic, on the front line, and how do we use that to, continue, putting that into place?
Yes, absolutely. Those are some really great points. And one thing you said earlier was the fact that the system is sort of broken. And I just kind of want to highlight that, because for physicians that are listening, I think a lot of people sort of close up when you hear about personal resiliency, because folks are sort of concerned that we're then negating the systemic issues that exist. And now we're saying, now we also have to become personally resilient in a system that's failing. And so I just want to highlight, when we're talking about resilience and sort of improving the healthcare system as a whole, there are multiple different facets to this. And one is definitely systemic changes. And another one, is your culture, wherever you work, your culture of well-being. And then the third, obviously, is personal resilience. And so I specifically talk about personal resilience because these are the one thing that we have 100% control over as, a physician, as a human. You have control over your own personal resilience and the choices you make and how you respond to those things. And so that's why I talk about this, not because those other three things aren't important, but because this is the one thing we have full control over. So you mentioned, what does all this mean? And so I'll say, my mission as a physician has always been, to have a long and fulfilled career where I can treat every patient that I meet with compassion, dignity, and respect. And the resiliency tools that I practice and that I teach include tools like mindfulness, gratitude, self-regulation, perceptual maturation, among other tools. But those tools just give us all the right things that we need so that we can continue to practice those types of things in a stressful environment. So for example, I can be present, intentional, and mindful, regardless of what I've just experienced. So, a few months ago, I was taking care of a patient, and I had to tell the patient's family that their patient just had a stroke, and it was such a severe stroke that they were likely not going to live. And it was, that's never easy, regardless of how many times you do it. It's never easy to sit with the family to do that. But because of the tools that I've practiced, I was able to sit there calmly, quietly, give that patient and their family the respect, and the compassion that moment deserved. And, hold people's hand, bring everybody into the room, have that conversation with everybody, and sit there and feel with them, be empathic. And then I was able to walk out of that room, take a deep breath, and prepare myself for what was next so that I could be both mentally and emotionally ready for the next emergency I got to take care of. And all of that comes from practicing resiliency tools every day. And you're right, I teach these courses, and you're not going to learn everything in a course. Fantastic, you have the tools. Now you get to practice them so that you can easily adapt them to those stressful moments. So, I guess for what I would say is it's not just about learning, it's about learning and practicing so that when, the rubber hits the road and you're in those moments, you have those tools in your tool belt that you can easily access.
Yeah. And it's important to highlight that even in the face of the virus, and to me, and we've talked about this, previous guests, where it's different because one, it's affecting us globally. And two is that, for us that haven't really brought up our own stuff, quote unquote, whether it's unprocessed trauma, whether it's, different relational, marital issues, whatever the case may be, it brings up old stuff. And for other people who have already previously diagnosed anxiety, depression, and other mental issues, it enhances it, right? So, we're living in a time where, it's different because it's in the history of humans, it's hitting something globally, whether it is prior to which flu, other types of flu pandemics, or even something similar as wartime, where, baby boomer generations have more experience with this. But different than war is that this is invisible. You can't see, you can't really see the actual, you can't see the virus. It's something that, it exists on a very, very microscopic level. And so it is different because people didn't accept it. They denied it. They, poo-pooed it. They just took it out of their psyche. And that's probably what contributed to it. But, it's important to accept where we are now and to kind of move forward. I think one of the highlights, again, is bringing it back to our front line and, being able to showcase to the public now more from media is that, we are battling something very, very challenging. Currently, right now, we don't have a good, clear treatment vaccine. We do have tests, but tests aren't 100% accurate. In terms of, healthcare providers, what are things that, because of their schedule, what are small tools or tips or practices that maybe they didn't have a mindfulness practice or a resiliency course that, you probably, have taught in the past, didn't have that in the begin with? What are some things we can start off, with?
Yes, that's a really, really, really good question, because we want to give physicians the tools to be able to leave and still be able to function outside of the hospital. You still have family, you still have other, and I just also want to be clear that even though I've been teaching this and practicing this, I myself, I'm not by any means perfect. I'm human, and I still feel anger and fear and sadness and stress specifically around all these things, frustration about the lack of preparedness that we had, anger and fear about the lack of testing, afraid that I was going to bring this stuff home to my family. And again, I'm okay feeling those things because I'm human and humans have feelings, and feelings, don't define who you are. They're just feelings. And the last thing I'd want anyone to ever do, especially physicians or anyone else feeling these types of things, is resist that's coming up for you, because those are your emotions, and what you resist will persist, And again, I've been practicing these tools for so long now that I can now catch myself when I'm in a negative emotion, when I'm feeling fear or afraid, I can catch myself and usually process and connect where that's sort of coming from. And I also know that my work doesn't define me and who I am. And when I leave the hospital, I want to be able to leave all my work stuff at the hospital and be able to come home again and be present with my husband and kids. And sometimes I can't do that, and with all this COVID stuff in the very beginning when it was happening, there was a lot on my mind when I was leaving, and it was really difficult to just turn everything off. And so what I've done, and something that I want to encourage a lot of providers out there to do, is surround yourself with support structure, with friends and colleagues that can really rely on you to process, that you can rely on as well, so that you can process out loud with them. And I'll have to say that, it hasn't really been a priority of a lot of people, I think, to develop those support structures. Some people innately have that human capacity to connect and are able to talk out loud. But when the average sort of healthcare professional, especially physicians, talking about emotions, it's not the easiest thing to ever be vulnerable, and it's hard. And usually we are the rock for our family. We're the people that come off as a strong person. I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. Don't worry. I'm going to go to work and be fine. Even if we're afraid, we don't want to make our family more scared or more afraid, And so we never want to show that vulnerability. And that will totally, totally wear on you time after time if you don't sort of take care of that. So my recommendation is have 2 or 3 people on your speed dial that you can always rely on, and, just the way you as a physician or as a human being, just the way you're the rock for other people around you, those people around you love you, and they want to be the rock for you too sometimes. And by you letting those people be strong for you, you're just letting them, feel important the way you feel important when you support them. So my big recommendation is just have sort of a call tree of people that you can call so you can process out loud. I know for me, because I get to commute maybe sometimes, anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic. On my drives, I get to call. I have my sisters, my parents are always 100% available. If I really need to vent and no one else answers their phones, I can always call my parents. And I have sisters and friends and people that I trust that I can just share things with. And it's always, HIPAA compliant. I don't share anything inappropriate, but I just always, you want to have those people there that you can process out loud with. And this COVID thing that you mentioned, it's 100% unprecedented and it's totally wild. And, a few weeks ago when all of this started in San Francisco, I ran my hospital's incident command center, which is our hospital-wide disaster response. And as you can imagine, it was tons of long hours in a high stress environment. I was managing both the hospital-wide response to this and still taking care of patients in the emergency department. I wasn't stopping my clinical practice. And quickly, I started noticing the same signs of stress. I'd lie in bed thinking, okay, was that person going to test positive for COVID? Because our testing was still taking anywhere from like 2 to 4 days. And if they were positive, did I take all the right precautions? Did I have the right PPE on? Did I wear goggles into that room? Was I making sure that I did all these things? Because, I felt a lot of fear. I was really scared that not that I wasn't going to be able to take care of the patient, or not even that I was going to get sick. My fear came from bringing things home to my family.
Yeah.
It's super scary. And I realized early on that I wasn't using the healthiest coping mechanisms. And again, I was really fortunate that I was able to quickly connect those dots, and be like, okay, I'm not sleeping at night. What can I do to support myself in sleeping?
Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview.
And so one of the things that I teach, and I've actually heard you talk about this on the podcast in the past, the breathing technique, the 4-7-8, and I don't necessarily teach that, but I teach something called self-regulation breathing technique, also known as box breathing. The 4x4 breathing, you've likely heard of this, but it's something that's super easy for people to grasp, and so I like to teach it. And I think for people sort of listening, something you can do is, picture a box, the 4 sides of a box. And what you do is you take 4 breaths in to inhale, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then you take 4 seconds to exhale, and then you hold your breath for 4 seconds. And what you use that for is, the second that you're feeling stress, or for me, what I was experiencing is I'd lie in bed to go to sleep, and I would just be running through my shift. Like, okay, all those patients I was seeing, who was positive, who was not, who did I intubate? I hope they're okay. The patient I sent to the ICU. And I was having a tough time sleeping. And so I was like, okay, this is not who I want to be. And so for the first 4 seconds, what you do is you acknowledge yourself for catching yourself in that moment. So my first 4 breaths, oh, I'm so happy that I caught myself thinking about all these things. The next 4 breaths, relaxing my body in the next 4 breaths. And then as you breathe out, the breathing out is actually the relaxation response. That's when you sort of stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your body that lets you relax. So you exhale, and as you're exhaling, you just relax all your parts of your body. And then the next 4 breaths, you sit in gratitude. Gratitude that you caught yourself, gratitude that you're shifting, And you keep doing that. You keep doing that. For me, I do it until I fall asleep. But if you're awake and you're catching yourself in a stressful moment and you want to catch yourself to react appropriately, you do that until you notice that your body has relaxed and you can shift out of that stressful moment. So it's called box breathing. And again, it's a 4-second inhale, 4-second hold your breath to acknowledge that you caught yourself, relax your body, 4 seconds to exhale. And exhaling again is where you stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system to relax. And then 4 seconds, and I call it the 4 seconds of gratitude. You take 4 seconds to just appreciate yourself in gratitude for catching yourself in that moment.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Thank you for that. So there's many points to what you're saying. So before I go and comment on the box breathing, which is awesome. So I definitely concur with you in terms of, currently before the pandemic, to kind of give you a snapshot for our listening audience that are non-healthcare related, we we have a foundation of schooling, training, multiple, just years and years of blood, sweat, and tears into, learning a craft, honing a craft, training, until we are proverbially, black and blue. The thing is that I agree with you, depending on which culture, or you came from a line of doctors, you are kind of seen as the pillar, as the anchor of the family household, or of your generation and community. We are meant to be that community leader, whether you're a primary care specialist or a, specialist, not, seeing primary care, but we're all very, very important. And so when you before I say that, we also operate on guidelines, right? We also have, a lot of accrediting, organizations, and, we have standards that we, practices that we follow. When you insert the pandemic, I wouldn't say that kind of goes out the window. It's almost like, it does, metaphorically speaking, because it changes so rapidly. So just as the general public is going into a frenzy and panicking and not knowing what's going on the front lines in our healthcare system, we are very similar, because we are looking towards, very, very not hand selected, but just a very, a couple, like 2 or 3, maybe under a handful of entities and organizations that we have to follow, whether it's the state departments, whether it's the CDC or the World Health Organization. And these things are changing pretty much on a day-to-day basis. And so you add that, and then on top of that, our lack of supplies, right? Our lack of equipment, maybe in some parts of the country and hospital systems, lack of staffing. And so, it's very, very, very stressful for our healthcare providers, because we want to be able to do the best job we can. But unfortunately, we just been, ill prepared. And, I'm not here this is not a show about, pointing fingers, but it's just to kind of emphasize where we're at, and, and because of that extra layer or many layers of stress, you do find healthcare workers just fatigued and burnt out and just beaten to, the core. And physician wellness and burnout have already been a hot topic before all this happened. So, yeah. Yeah, like yes. Already that's a totally separate, separate conversation, just to highlight a statistic. And I don't know, Vanessa, if you have a more recent statistic, but physician suicide is not really talked about. And I think up to one doctor commits suicide before this pandemic happened a day. So it's very unfortunate. And, we have to support our workers. And again, I think it's super important to emphasize that we're humans, we're human beings. I love the fact that you talked about, hey, let me preface this by saying, I'm a human. I'm still practicing. I'm still doing the best we can, and that's important to emphasize.
Absolutely. You just made me so emotional when you mentioned the physician suicide. You're absolutely right. And there's so much underreporting. We don't know the exact number, but it's anywhere from 300 to 400 physicians a year. So about one a day, and it's just. That's before this stressful pandemic, which is so sad because, as you said, if you have underlying anxiety, depression, all those things, and now you're quarantined at home or you can't work or your salaries got cut, because you probably know this, but besides those few states where you're seeing a huge volume of patients, the vast majority of physicians are actually getting their salaries cut during this time. And that's stressful. In most physicians, there's like a single family income. And so if you're the only person working and now your salary is getting cut, you're in the same boat, as everyone else. And unfortunately, the rest of society often looks at physicians as like having this golden ticket in terms of income, and that's not the case. And on top of that, you have $300,000 of student debt and all these other things, and so
that's a different conversation.
I know, right? Let's not even get started on that. I will say one thing though, we talked about, a few kind of tools that physicians can use. I talked about the support system, building one for yourself. I talked about the 4x4 breathing. Another one that's really helpful, especially with what you said, leaving the shift stressed out, or even starting your shift stressed out or afraid, because you don't know what you're going to see. And one thing that works really well is having a mantra. Again, mantra sounds a little woo-woo, and so people don't usually like to talk about it, but I'll tell you, saying things out loud. For example, for me, when I started realizing that my coping mechanisms when I was going into my shift weren't really healthy, I was afraid and I hadn't presenced my fear yet. And so when I'd go on to my shift, I would try to keep everything light and joke around and everything is fine, and I would leave afraid, that did I catch something, am I going to bring something home to my family? And so I was like, okay, that's not who I want to be. And so I go onto my shift and I'm totally cautious and prepared. I have hospital-only scrubs. I change into everything, but I didn't really sort of say those things to myself. So now when I drive to the hospital, as soon as I get there, I have a whole process. On my way to the hospital, I do a communing meditation where I sit quietly for 10 minutes on the way there. I don't play a podcast. I don't play anything, although I love your podcast, Colin. But I turn it off for those 10 minutes. And I sit quietly on my way to work, and I do breathing exercises. And then I do quick three gratitude things that I'm grateful for. And it can be, anything as long as it was different from yesterday. So I'm like, I'm grateful there's no traffic. I'm grateful the sun is rising. Oh, I'm so grateful that it's nice and warm today. And so I do my gratitude practices, and then I set my intention for my shift. Okay, today I'm going to have a calm, productive shift. And so when I get to the hospital, I then sit quietly in my car and I tell myself I am cautious, I'm prepared, and I am safe, And I think the safe one is the one most important for me anyway, because I have so much fear that I'm going to bring this home to my family. And so I sit there and I say, I'm cautious, I'm prepared, I'm safe. And then I say, am I really cautious? Yeah, of course. I have a clean and dirty zone. I'm going to wear these scrubs. I don't take anything else with me into the department. I have appropriate number of PPE, the protective equipment. So I have N95s, I have goggles, I have everything. I'm prepared. I'm cautious. And, I'm a pretty good doctor. I've trained, I've been an ER doctor for 11 years. I've trained and I'm good. I'm prepared. I can take care of what comes in the door. And I'm taking all the precautions to stay safe. And so I say, I'm cautious, I'm prepared, I'm safe. And I notice that when I go into my shift, when the ambulance calls us and lets us know what's coming in, when we get those ring downs, when it's something that's like a code 3, I know I'm going to have to go in there and resuscitate a patient. I tell myself, again, I'm cautious, I'm prepared, I'm safe. I have everything I need, because nowadays, anything that's coming through ambulances are going to be COVIDs until proven otherwise, And so having those mantras can be so calming. And what it does, it turns off your stress response, your cortisol levels that are just like shooting up like crazy. And so for us that are trying to protect ourselves from burnout and from compassion fatigue, you want to turn off those cortisol levels when you don't need them. I don't want those running crazy before the patient even gets into the emergency department. Then I'm going to be all out of my reserve, And so I tell everyone, have a mantra to calm your body, so that even if it's just like connect with your breath, And so when I'm in the department, I get the ring down, I say I'm safe, I take a few deep breaths, or I do a quick 4x4 box breathing, and then I go and see my patients.
Yeah, I love that. I think having a mantra, me personally, I believe in them. I don't voice them out loud. I internally process them in my head. And, for other people, it resonates, for others don't. So, for this series and for the guests and what they share, honestly, it's you pick what resonates with you, and I'm going to say this over and over again, because not everything is going to work for everyone. But the purpose of this series and all these, wonderful, awesome guests is to share these tools and these tips and words of wisdom. So whatever resonates with you, use them. You know what I'm saying? Because right now, everyone needs help of every type of level. And, we're all in this together. And I know it's something that's repeated, but it is very, very true. Just like how this virus spread because we're all together, that's how we're going to get out of it together. You know what I'm saying? So it's very, very important. And, I don't see why, with, I don't know how many billions right now, 7.5 to going towards 8, how we don't affect one another. And, that's the purpose of this is, we want to be able to spread this ripple effect. So, but yeah, the mantra is very, very important. Even things like, when the NBA, the basketball league was playing, you could see the opposing teams. What they do is that they form in a circle, and they don't. I don't think they do this on the court. I think they do this in the locker room where they huddle and they either pray with one another or they, talk to one another. One of them leads the group in saying like, here, this is how we're going to start this game. It's going to be a good game. It doesn't matter what they're going to bring, blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? So,
Totally. And that's like what the USA women's national soccer team did and why they were so effective. They were so connected mentally with each other and with their goal of winning. And before every game, it was the same thing. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but for you out there listening, if you YouTube USA's women's national soccer team pre-game prep, oh my God, it's so moving. It like pumps me up.
But that's the thing. It's like, like that saying goes, there's no I in team. There's definitely an I in virus, but the point is that togetherness, and as a team, that's how the healthcare system, once we're, motivated and functioning well together, it's like a bike chain, we're just doing it, it rolls. That's how the bike moves. It's because it has that multiple links working simultaneously together. You know what I'm saying? So we talked about mantra. We talked about, one other, thing you can do is writing affirmations on a whiteboard, looking at quotes. We've talked about meditation practice. In other episodes, we talk about yoga practice. For me, I do fitness. So, right now, I'm working out indoors. I do CrossFit since May of last year, but now we have workouts indoors. So I continuously do that. Are there some days that I just don't feel like working out? Yes, definitely. But I know that by moving, and this is what Tony Robbins, says, is that, when you're in a certain type of low state emotion, whether it's, anxiety or depression or something like that, you have to change your physiology. And I agree with him. It's, once you're able to move, sweat, move those muscles, you will feel better. And then we also talked about diet and all that other stuff. So, hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview. Yeah, so this is great. So, what other practices or tools, would you recommend, maybe shifting gears, in terms of the general public? The general public is, on the sidelines. They're just waiting for news updates. They are, not knowing when they can go back out there. Small business owners are, not knowing when they can reopen themselves. What can you say to them in terms of, understanding where we're at right now and, giving them tools?
Oh my gosh, that's great. I love that question. I think for me, what I've learned, I keep practicing. My word for 2020 actually was surrender, which, let me tell you, has come in handy during these times of not being able to control a lot of the things. But absolutely, I would say for the general public, and this is really, really hard. So if it resonates with you and it lands, use it. And if it doesn't, just let it roll off. But I will say number one is just do your best to let go. I think so many of us had expectations of what we were going to be able to create, like the month of March or the month of April. This is my goals, or I'm going to be able to make this much money or sell these many homes or whatever it is that you do. And now all of a sudden, if you're a parent, if you're homeschooling, if you don't have anyone else and your kids are at home with you all the time, or businesses are closed or nobody's out there buying homes or whatever it is that you do. And so I will say just number one, have self-compassion, forgive yourself and don't get upset with yourself that you're not meeting goals and timelines that you had set, because goals and timelines are arbitrary. You set them for yourself, and if you get to move the goalpost when the stars don't align. And right now, let me tell you, the stars are not aligning for everyone to accomplish what they wanted to the months of March and April, because things are closed. And so just have self-compassion. You're not the only one in that boat. I know I've talked to a lot of moms who are struggling because they're still working, trying to work full time and trying to do childcare. And that's really, really, really hard. And so you're not going to be able to be as productive. And my hope is that, most businesses understand that it's going to be hard if you're also the 100% childcare provider for your kids at home. So I would say number one, have self-compassion. And what does self-compassion look like? Self-compassion looks like saying, like, presencing that I had all these goals set. I'm likely not going to be able to accomplish them. That's okay. This is going to end just like everything ends. We're going to get through this like we get through everything. And then you can go back to your daily routine. And that's okay. The other thing I will say is, let go of what you can't control. A lot of, I think, anxiety and fear comes from expectations. We expect that something is going to go the way we want it. And when it doesn't, then we get upset, So, whatever you expected to happen in March and April is likely not, and it's not your fault. It's because there's a global pandemic happening, and don't blame yourself for that. It's not your fault if you don't mark off those boxes that you had sort of, whatever list you had, if you don't tick off those boxes, it's not your fault. There's a global pandemic happening. Remember that, And so I would say let go of what you can't control and shift those expectations, And I'm 100% guilty of that. I get frustrated sometimes when I'm like, oh, I was supposed to do X, Y, Z. And I have to remind myself, I didn't plan to be like a kindergarten teacher, but here I am homeschooling my kid, and, as a mom and trying to do all these other things. And so I get to also practice self-compassion. And when I say it out loud, it also supports me in adopting that practice. So have self-compassion, let go of what you can't control, and shift your expectations. Because and the other thing I will say is people are just like waiting to hear when everything's going to reopen. They're just waiting. Okay, May 1st, this is the new deadline that's being talked about. And I know it's super complicated. I know it's not just about, yes, public health, we care about it 100%. We want people to be safe. We don't want to overwhelm hospitals, and we have to be really thoughtful when we think about reopening and how we reopen, and do we flip a switch or do we go slowly, to reopen? And I also know that this means that the economy has frozen, and that's really tough for a lot of people. Not everyone has the luxury to work from home. Not everyone has the luxury to continue to connect paychecks, or just like try to save money here or there so that you can still put food on your table. People don't have that luxury. And this isn't part of this topic, but that's why we're seeing health disparities in minority communities like we always do, because those are the communities that don't have the luxury to self-quarantine. They still have to go out and work and make money and feed their families and keep their lights on. And that's a huge struggle. But I will say for you, that I will just, be open and let go of when this is going to open again. If it opens on May 1st, okay. And if it doesn't, just don't hold on to that date, because you'll get really frustrated and upset when it doesn't happen. So I would just say for now, have compassion for the people that are making those decisions, because they have to take so much into consideration, both the safety of our community and public health of our community, and also the economy. And, that's no small feat.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of points. One, re-emphasizing that, when you are in a negative space, it's very, very, very easy to kind of fall into that black hole and fall into that rabbit hole of, that hamster wheel that keeps playing back and forth, whether it's a virus or not, you know what I'm saying? And I think one of the tools is definitely advocating, and you touched upon this, is, reshifting, how we're looking at this, operating from the place of gratitude. When I wake up, I'm thankful for my own health. I'm thankful for my friends and family. I'm thankful for the life I've been given so far, and being able to do this, you know what I'm saying? So, and still be able to help and contribute in different ways. And I think another point, a great point to talk about, is being almost like a chameleon, being adaptable, being changing. And that's what life is. If there's any truth, no matter your spiritual, religious practice, to me, what I've observed from life is, one of the real truths for me is that, life will never stay the same. And nothing is ever, permanent. And so when you think about that, whether there's certain deadlines or expectations or different plans and goals that you needed to meet, they're going to change, you know what I'm saying? And you have to think about a plan B or C, or being less attached, to that notion, and being okay with either way it comes down to, and just leaving it. I love the fact that you said surrendering and letting go. When you do that, you're acknowledging that, the world doesn't revolve around you. The universe doesn't revolve around us as humanity. And it doesn't reinforce that ego, you know what I'm saying? And saying that I let go and I surrender, meaning that, there's nothing I can do right now. and there's nothing I can do maybe for, a given period of time, but I'm allowing what is supposed to happen. Right. So obviously it just depends on your perspective and perception and belief. But I think a part of that is releasing that burden and pressure and stress that falls on our shoulders when we have that. So.
Oh, totally. And I love what you said about gratitude, because the science behind the gratitude practice is so incredible. When somebody practices, and this is for all of you out there listening, this is one simple, easy thing that you can do to really shift your perception and your perspective. So when you practice gratitude, what's happening in your brain is all the same neurotransmitters that get triggered. For example, when you take an antidepressant like serotonin or dopamine, those types of things, they start getting released just by you practicing gratitude. So one gratitude practice a day. You get up in the morning, you're like, thank you for having another day to live. I'm grateful that I have another day. Or, walking outside, I'm grateful that I have feet to walk on, or breath. And those sound so kind of silly and basic, but in all honesty, living with gratitude, it just shifts your perspective and will actually increase all of those positive neurotransmitters in your brain. And gratitude, those neurotransmitters, they're addictive, and so the more you do it, the more you want them. And what I've noticed now is that, I'm sitting at breakfast with my kids, and I practice this with my kids all the time. And at breakfast in the morning with my kids, I'm just scanning outside. I just served everybody breakfast. We're sitting down at the table, and just automatically I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for the jasmine flowers that are blooming. I'm so grateful. I don't say this out loud, but in my head I'm thinking this because I practiced it so much. And my kids know that they get to now tell me 3 things they're grateful for. And they can be any 3 things they want, as long as it's not the same 3 things from yesterday, because then it's not a practice anymore. Now you're just repeating,
Yeah.
And so it's awesome the things they say. My son will say, I'm grateful for Cars, because he got to watch Cars the movie the other day.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. So yes, practicing those types of things like gratitude and all those other things totally shift your perspective. It's really incredible, and it's free, and it doesn't require medication.
Yeah, definitely. And, looking at it from a different light, I mean, yes, we are more indoors, and some of us are experiencing cabin fever, and all this other notion. But, look what it has allowed us to do. It gave us more opportunity to practice more self-care. Maybe you can practice a new hobby. I've had so many friends said that I've completed 5 puzzles, this week, or take up, like I said, a new hobby, or learn something new, or pick up something that you didn't do before. But I think what a beautiful thing, what it does is that it helps us to slow down. As Americans, we go super fast. As healthcare providers, we go super fast, probably faster because, for this pandemic, yeah, we go super fast, but just in general, we go so fast that it can be very challenging to be present. It can be very challenging to, be with your loved ones and actually have a conversation and not be distracted by the noise that we've created as a society. So, take the opportunity to, to relish in the moments that you have now that you're indoors with your loved ones, with your family members, or if you do not have that, relish in the moments that you have with yourself, and just because you can't go outside means that you can't go inward. And, and I heavily advocate going inward. And what I mean by that is getting in touch with yourself and, knowing that you are, safe, like, Dr. Vanessa is saying, you are well, and, you are of, peaceful mind. And, again, you're not your thoughts or your emotions, what I'm saying? And, you are enough, you are perfect the way you are, what I'm saying? So this has been great. I know we could talk about this forever, but I would love to hear about your closing remarks, and for people, whether it's the general public or healthcare providers, how they can reach out to you, how can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to thank you, Colin, for creating this podcast. It's a fantastic idea, giving people the tools that they need, and understanding that, wellness, resilience, self-compassion, self-care, all of those things are incredibly important. Whether you're a physician or not a physician, it doesn't matter. Those are just regular things you need to survive, So In closing, I guess I just want to say that as a physician, I'm human. Like doctors are all human, and like humans, we have emotions, we have fear, anxiety, frustration. And there's no such thing as hazard pay for any physician working out there. This is just our profession. This is what we do. I remember my friends being so shocked and surprised that we weren't getting hazard pay. I didn't even think about that ever until they brought it up. And so, doctors aren't getting hazard pay, and neither are nurses. And for the most part, their salaries are getting cut. And that's, so I guess I would just say have compassion. Have compassion for, the physicians that you're working with out there. If you have friends or family members that are doctors, whether they're in the front line or not on the front lines, reach out to them. Let them know you're thinking about them. And if your doctor's appointments are getting canceled or things are getting moved around, I would just, I would just ask that you have compassion and understand that there's a lot of moving parts here, and doctors are trying to do their best to keep you safe, keep themselves safe, and keep their family safe. And in terms of contacting me, you can reach me. You can check out my website, Vanessa Calderon. My last name is spelled Calderon. And it's VanessaCalderonMD.com. And Colin, you said it exactly right when you actually introduced me. It's Vanessa Calderon. That's right, there's an accent after the O.
Yes.
So you can check me out there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. You can find my links on my website, or I'm sure, Colin, you're going to post the links as well. So, and it was a pleasure speaking with you, Colin. You're an incredible human being doing wonderful things. And so
Thank you.
I hope your listeners enjoyed this.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time and the passion of doing what you do and being able to lend your voice and, share with us your energies today. So I really appreciate it. Guys, this has been another episode of Thrive Bites on air, staying well amongst COVID. Thank you so much. For those of you who not able to join us live, this will be recorded and published later on. And please check our regular season when it does come back. I'm going to make that announcement real soon. And thank you for listening on, guys, and be well and be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Thank you, Vanessa.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, guys, that was another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like that episode, please subscribe and follow weekly for new episodes. And don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts.